My name's Nate. I'm an alcoholic. Yeah. Thank you for the introduction. Oh, she's bringing me water too. What an angel. And thanks for asking me to share, guys. So, Brant and the puppet master. Yeah. So I'm gonna just kind of go over my story of, what it was like, and then hopefully we'll stick more on what it's like now. My sobriety date is June 11th, 2009. And it's not that I did something right that day, it's that I stopped running. I grew up in a pretty decent family. We're a split family. And there was nothing wrong. It was just I was bored. And there was something different than me from a young age. My sisters were very vocal, and they would argue with my mom, and I kind of used that as a little gateway, because if I just said, Mom, I'll do anything you want, the sisters are so bad, and I'll never be like them, I kind of skated away for a long time. Nobody knew any other difference that I was doing anything wrong. My mom likes to give me crap now because she has this little thing from when I was like 13 or 14, and it was like a little mom thing we made in school that just said, I literally wrote that on it. It's like, Mom, I won't be like the girls. I promise to always be there for you. So there was something wrong with my thinking as a young one too. I grew up, I started to get in some trouble. I lived in a small town at the time, is what I'd consider a small town. It's not the same now, but in Payson, Utah. And I think a part of my story too is before we moved to Payson, before I was 11 years old, we moved 23 times. So I lived in California, I lived a lot of places when I was younger. For me it was, I would kind of get into having friends, and then we'd be gone, and I'd go to finding new friends, and that's kind of what happened for me is that was kind of the norm. And so my family was the people I was closest with. My mom's youngest brother, she's the second of 9 kids, and he was only 8 years older than us. Yeah, so he's 8 years older than me, and that's who I started doing things with when I was 10 years old. Started with a little smoking. So I'm in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, but my story is more than that. If it offends you, please call your sponsor. They're just words. I was just, when we were young, I was kind of a happy kid. I was very content doing my own thing. I remember just hitting a ball against my wall forever, and kind of got into some sports when we got older. I just wanted to be with the big kids. I wanted to be with my uncle and his friends, and I wanted to be older than I was. And that's kind of how it all started. And it's not that when I was doing those things with older people, drinking, smoking, it was like I was accepted, and I was like, oh yeah, this is what I've always wanted, I'm part of. At some point in my life, I started doing some, my first true addiction to me, because it definitely was causing problems in my life, was actually cocaine, and then turned to crack cocaine. And at the end of it, after about a good 2-year run on it, I decided, I was just like, oh my gosh, this is a problem, I gotta stop. And so I didn't stop, I just replaced it. And that's the reason I bring this up, is because this is how I did life for 10 years, 11 years from then, is that something would become the problem, and then I'd replace it with something else. So in my story, there's, you name it. The only drug I only did once was PCP, because I tried to run through a fence, and I was like, that's a bad deal, I should probably not do that again. Other than that, I was like, yes, this is the fix. This is what I'm going to do. Started getting in trouble. Well, that small town got me out of trouble when I was too young, when I was in my late teens. I was going to parties and stuff, what good teenagers do, you know, or at least what I thought they did. And so the police chief at the time was a family friend, and so I remember the first time I got in trouble, like, the way I do it is I started drinking at 8 a.m. in the morning, and me and a friend got really messed up and then went to the party and continued. At some point in the party, I'm laying down and I'm just trying to hide from everybody because I'm spinning, I'm sick, and I'm done. And I remember throwing rocks at people. I went and hid out on the side of the house in the gravel, and I was throwing rocks. And then next thing I know, like, I'm in a bedroom. They bring that other friend. He's got alcohol poisoning, and I'm mad because I'm just trying to get by. You know, shows being a red flag that I'm not caring of my friend, but I was only concerned about what was going on with me. And eventually, turns out the cops came next when I was downstairs, and I thought it was the people from the party, so I hit the cop. And that, you know, I wish that would have been an eye-opener, but the police chief just said, hey, look, you call your grandpa, because I know what your grandpa's going to do. You call him, and I'll let him come get you from the police station. So I didn't have any charges as a juvenile, but I got my first charge when I was 18, and then I did that thing where I was like, this is the problem. I was really good at getting out of trouble at first, because I would just switch it, and I would just play whatever. But yeah, I couldn't stop. You know, in my mind I thought I was stopping, but all I was doing was replacing it with something worse. And so yeah, I started getting my first felonies when I was 23. And then my best thinking, this is Nate's thinking still today without this program, is that when I got that first felony, I was like, oh, well, hey, they can't make me a felon again. Like, I'm just going to go, you know. So I got 6 felonies within a couple-year period, and a lot of other stuff with it. And I just, at this point, I know I have a problem. I know I need to stop. But I didn't know there was I didn't know there was a way to stop. Like, I was scared, but that was my solution, and it worked for so dang long. But it stopped. And I didn't know there was anything to do about it. Now, that's because I wouldn't take help. You know, I was in the system, and they kept sending me to different programs, and I'd be like, no, that's not for me, and then I would run away from it, and I wouldn't ever give it a chance. I actually met a gentleman here in this room in one of those places, you know. Well, I met a few people that come to these rooms in those places, but yeah, I didn't know how to stop. Eventually, I was running from me. I just had this hole, and I didn't know what to do about it. You know, I look back to then, and I missed, I think it was 6 Father's Days in a row, because I guess I always got arrested in summer, but I was locked up for 6 Father's Days in a row, like, and I didn't see a problem, you know. I remember going off on a cop and telling him, man, the only person I'm hurting is me. I'm not hurting anybody else. Today I'm glad to say I don't believe that. Like, I know that if I went out, it would affect others as well. It wouldn't just affect Nate. So anyways, they gave me the day comes where I did lots of jail time, like maybe some of you guys have. I was in and out of those places. I was on probation in Juab County, Utah County, and Salt Lake County, and then just for fun, another little private probation out of Salt Lake County as well. So at this point in my life, when I go to jail, wherever I got arrested, I'd do my time there, and then they would transfer me, so it was always a 3-jail stay. And that was fun. But, you know, at the end of it, like, and in jail all this time, I hear about this thing called drug court, and I'm like, man, look at all these guys. They just come in for the weekend. Like, those guys are idiots. Like, they're going to be doing this thing forever, you know? And so my time finally comes where they're like, hey, man, you need to do drug court. And I was like, no, I'm good. Give me another year in jail. Like, I'm just going to be back in and out. Like, why do I want to do that? And so the prosecutor or the public defender goes away, goes talks, and then he comes back to me and he's like, hey man, I don't think you understand this. Like, your only option is prison. So if you want prison, that's what you're going to get. And I was like, hey man, can I have that drug court thing? Like, that sounds all right. And luckily that's what God had put in my place at the time. So I did last chance drug court. And I didn't want to be sober. I just didn't want to be in trouble anymore. I had went almost, about 7 years of get in trouble, what can I get away with, eventually get in more trouble. And so I was just like, dude, I'm done. I'm done trying to get away with what I can get away with. I'm just going to do what they ask. Like, weird, huh? For me it was. It made no sense, but it was where I got. A friend of ours put it the best way, and I still share it to this day, but he's like, yeah, I was on a teeter-totter, and the fear of change is on one side, and the fear of staying the same was always like this, but it finally switched for me, and I was scared. I was scared to keep doing what I'm doing. And that's where I got. So I did last chance drug court. I got to stay in jail for, I don't know, it was about 93 days, but, well, let's back up just real quick. So I actually went to treatment twice before that. The first time I went in, there's a guy in this program that's still in this program from that day. I don't recall it the way he does, but I don't really recall a lot from the day. So, but I went in. I was supposed to be there at 11. I got there at 1. I wouldn't tell him my name. I was being me at the time, and I wouldn't cooperate. And so I ended up leaving after throwing up in the garbage can, he says, and not answering any of his questions. I asked him to use his name, da-da-da-da-da. So that was my first try. Second try I went, our stepfather, Lars died, but that was the guy that was married to my mom. And I used that as an excuse because I didn't want to be there. And so I left. The next time, it was from jail. They walked me across the Utah County Jail to Foothill, and I'm grateful for that. This time I stayed. It did what they suggested. Luckily, I had a lot of consequences at the time for leaving because I don't know by myself that I would have stayed and done the things they wanted. But consequences were great enough, and I finally understood that. And so, because I had to have all the judges sign off and the judge in Salt Lake to take away my second-degree felonies and put them on prevention, so that I could even do drug court. But yeah, then in that treatment center, they brought me here, and I hated it. I did at first. I wanted to hate it, at least. I didn't like the God thing. I didn't like the fact that everybody was happy. That didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. And the prayers and stuff, and everybody hugging, and I was just like, this is bull crap. But somewhere in here, everything shut up. And I felt at home, and I didn't know why I didn't want to, but something felt right. And I hadn't felt that way in a long time, because I'd been running, man. That was what my life was, is I just ran from everything. And so I stuck around, and I listened to you guys, because at first I was like, this ain't going to work for me. And I listened to you guys, and I started to believe that it did work for you guys. And I was like, holy cow, if it worked for them, maybe I have a chance. And so in those early years, like I said, I give it to my higher power today for giving me the path he gave me. I don't think it was a coincidence. I was in drug court for 18 months. And so that meant I got piss tested. And that first year, I got piss tested 3 times a week. And so it wasn't like Nate thought he could go out and get away with anything. It was like, if I'm going to do this, this is just saying I'm going to prison. So let's not, you know. And in that time, I found a home group. And the reason I picked the home group, well, one is I didn't have a car. I didn't have a whole lot. Weird, huh? We get here with tons, right? Well, some of us do, some of us don't. That's why the book is written, is to raise that bottom. You don't have to go down to the depths, but unfortunately I like to beat my head against the wall, so I did. But my uncle, it finally clicked in my head when I went to this meeting that there used to be a meeting at Flying J, and they had a pretty good breakfast buffet. And so at one point, he had just got out of prison, and I had just got out of one of my jail stints. I didn't stay sober, and unfortunately, he didn't either. But he was doing something different, and I thought he was a little different, but that's why I wasn't hanging out with him either, because he wasn't doing the things I was doing. But it dawned on me I did go to an AA meeting, because he tricked me. He said, "Hey, Nate, you want to go get breakfast in the morning?" And so I went and got breakfast. And this is how oblivious I am, is I didn't realize until I came to these rooms that that's what I was at. But the only reason is he had one of these. He was the one packing this around, and I was like, oh my gosh. I was like, he took me to AA. Took me to the A&A, you know. And so he ended up dying. Between me and him, we came up with some good ideas. He lost his battle to this addiction, and unfortunately I was right there. I wasn't at his house, but that was another God moment, I believe, because I was supposed to be, but it snowed really bad, so I didn't want to drive from Payson to Salt Lake. And today, I still have his 12 and 12. I didn't get sober right away. I got sober 6 months later after he passed away. I had to go do some research and make sure that things were different, and then God gave me the consequences. But back to, I like to get squirreled, so it is just what it is. But back to that home group, I started going, and we were just talking about it when we were at dinner, but back then there was a lot of meetings in Payson, and so it didn't matter what A it was. I fit in all of them, so I went to them. If there was a meeting in Payson, that meant I could walk to it. I didn't have to ask for help, because I wasn't good at that. I wasn't good at it at first. And that's also, I think, in my story, why sometimes quickly, sometimes slowly, I didn't get a driver's license until I had 6 years, because if it would have been my way, I wouldn't have asked help from any of y'all. But God was like, well, let's be honest, I didn't get it right away, because I lived in Payson, I had treatment in Provo, I had P-tests in Provo, go check in with my PO, and then the old Palace. And so I was still driving. My sponsor was giving me a hard time. He's like, dude, you really shouldn't be doing that. And I'm like, I got this, I got this, I got this, I gotta, you know. And I think I had close to a year, and I was leaving the Palace on Geneva, and I was going to check in with my PO, and an officer that, I don't blame him for pulling me over. He made up some stuff, but he also gave me a DUI and somebody else a DUI that I hung out with all the time. So he knew me very well, and I've looked like this for a long time. I haven't cut my hair since that day I got sober. So I haven't changed. I kind of stick out. So, I mean, he saw me and he was like, okay, pulled me over. I told him what's going on in life, and told him, you know, like, hey, I just came from AA. I'm going to check in with my PO. He said, I believe you, but you still broke the law, and wrote me a ticket. But what he did do for me is he said, I'm like, man, I got to check in with my PO. I'm like, can you give me a ride? He's like, no, I got to go, but you just don't go anywhere. Just I got to go. And he drove off, and so I went and checked in with my PO. And I was honest. Holy cow, man. I showed up, and I was like, hey, I got a ticket. You know, where before I would have tried to lie and And that's the silly part, is I look back at my life, and I just lied about dumb stuff. Like, it didn't matter, and it says it in the book, but I look back at the things I lied about, and it's just silly. But anyways, so my PO, he was happy with me because I didn't fail a drug test the whole time I was in drug court. And eventually they take me down stages, and it was a good thing for me that I had that consequence, because I don't know if I said it, but when I first got here, I just wanted to get off paper, man. I didn't want to be sober, and you guys got me. Sorry and thank you. But because I did the suggestions from those old timers. I worked the steps. I got a sponsor, and this is a story I like to tell a lot, because I think I only had like 60 or 90 days, and some of you will know these names, some of you won't, but Old Man Don, Old Grandpa Don was part of my home group, and Verna was part of my home group, and they both had, at that time, well, Don's sobriety birthday was, it was 9 days before I was born. So at that time, I'm 29, so I guess that's how many years he had. But they're like, hey, you're going to be of service. You're going to do this central office thing. And I was like, oh, yeah, I would be so willing, but I don't have a car or a driver's license, and that's all the way in Orem. And Don's like, oh, sweet. Well, I'm going to go to it anyway. So where do you live, Nate? I'll come get you. I was like, but that's what he did for me, though. And it was cool. It's some of the times I was cherished, because I got to drive with him over to central office once a month, and got to know that old guy a lot better. So at that time in my life, this is where I start going like this. I started patting myself on the back, as I graduate drug court, and I think it was right before I had 18 months or right after I had 18 months that I graduated drug court. And then I eventually got this job up in Salt Lake, and I was actually working with somebody that's in this program. And so he was actually helping me get up to Salt Lake. He would come pick me up in Pleasant Grove and go up there. And then I ended up moving in with him in Orem. And from there, I found my next higher power. It was a gal. And there's a reason in here that we suggest that the men work with the men and the women work with the women. I found the loophole, because my sponsor had always told me that if you didn't mess with somebody until they had a year, and at that point, he might have told me and worked the steps, but I just disregarded if I ever heard that. She did a year in prison, so she had it. She had it. This was the one, So eventually I moved out to Salt Lake and moved close to where I was working. She became my new higher power. And I really ceased to work this program. At first I didn't. I'd go to some meetings, and it's not that I didn't like the meetings up there, it's that I wasn't being honest with myself. I wasn't doing the things I needed to do. And so I started letting that alcoholic thinking come back in, and tell me all these things, because I don't know about you guys, but mine still does to this day. But the more I stay connected to my higher power, the less I hear those things, or they're at least not as loud. But yeah, so moved up there. I'd call my sponsor, let's guess, and say like once every 2 months maybe. And I'd be like, hey man, am I fired? And he'd be like, man, my sponsor never fired me, so no, but call me. And I don't know if that was good or bad. So eventually we'll just speed up this clock, because I ended up getting to that point where I was dry drunk and I wasn't happy, and I got over 2 years of sobriety. And at first I thought, hey man, I'm killing it. Like, I'm doing so good in life. And then I look back and that's why I see it, is because it was all I. And then anytime I would talk to my sponsor, it wasn't me, it was we need to do this stuff. And so I was looking for every excuse. The day came, and I knew drinking wasn't the right thing to do. I knew the chaos that it was going to cause. But I couldn't take how I felt anymore. And so I made the decision. I was like, screw it. I know where this path's going to take me, but I don't want to feel like this anymore. And so I walked across. We lived like a block away from 7-Eleven. And so I walk over there, and I remember kind of just muddling to my higher power, like, why has it got here? Blaming him and not me. That's what I like to do when I'm hurting. But I went to open up that fridge door, the beer aisle, and my phone rang. And I answered my phone, and it was somebody else in this program. And he was struggling too. And he was like, I told him, like, I was honest. I was just like, hey man, look, this is where I'm at. Like, I'm about ready to buy this beer. And he's like, well, that's about where I'm at, but how about let's do this instead? And he's like, I'll drive over to you. Let's talk for a half hour. And if we want to get loaded, let's get loaded. I was like, I can get behind that. And so he came over, he drove over, and we didn't get loaded. We talked. We talked about this program. And at that decision, that time, if any of you were around and we're back at the old palace, I moved back down here, and I had to become humble because, I was so good at patting myself on the back at that time, and I was like, oh, look, this is what I got myself again. And so I came back here, and I moved in with my dad and my stepmom. And that sucked because I had to ask again. I'd been living out on my own for a little bit, and I was like, man, I was doing so good. And but I remember I had a friend that he actually went through drug court, and he worked at the same place as I did, and I was going to quit, and he's like, hey man, I live in Lehigh, you live in Provo, like, I'll come pick you up every day. Like, don't quit your job. Like, we can talk recovery, and I'll take you to work every day. And I was like, okay, I'm signed up. And then at that time, like, because I was a mess, man, and that's when, luckily today, I know that's when I got to lean into this program. So what I'd do is he'd come pick me up in the morning in Provo, and then we'd go to work in Sandy, and then I'd have him drop me off at the palace. And I would just sit there until the last meeting, and then I would ask somebody else to drive me home, because I still don't have a license. And then, yeah, I cried a lot, and I got honest. And I got honest with you guys, and I started working with my sponsor again, and actually doing the things of the program that got me to where I was patting myself on the back. But this time, I didn't pat myself on the back. I went back to that first year of when my HP got the credit instead of me, and things got better. They eventually got better, and so from there, that's actually that's kind of when I tricked her into falling in love with me, I think. But we didn't. Neither one of us would talk about it. It wasn't God's time yet. So, but yeah, I got involved after that. I started doing sober softball. Well, I was involved before that in sober softball, but I stayed involved in sober softball. My sponsor taught me something from early sobriety that I still do today, and it sucks because I like to bitch, but he told me if I like to bitch, then get involved and do something about it. And so because of that, I became the rules and ethics director of the Sober Softball League. Not fun. It It was a lot. But that was something that was wonderful in my life. Back then we used to go bowling after Wednesday night meeting. Somebody actually, he came in within my first couple of years, and he's back. He did some research, and he's back now. But we were actually reminiscing about times back then, and he asked me, he's like, well, do you guys still do all that fun stuff? Do you guys do the poker nights and the game nights? I'm like, somebody does, but we're all old now. I'm like, I leaned into being old. So, yeah, it's funny because we used to stay up all night back then. But yeah, so I'm living down here. I've got a good group of dudes around me, and we started going to my home group. At that point, became Rural 62. It was at the old palace. At some point, members in the fun part about Alcoholics Anonymous is it's a group decision, and so the home group decided to move it, and so we moved it, and it ended up being 4 of us for a long time. And the coolest part about that is I consider those 4 gentlemen to be some of my closest friends still. One lives in Canada, one lives in Colorado, and one lives just in Salt Lake, but we don't talk as much as we used to. But that's the relationships that Alcoholics Anonymous has given me now, is that I don't have to talk to them every day. The one friend comes into town, and I drop everything and I go hang out with him because the relationship that was built. And that's a big deal to me because I didn't have relationships when I got here. I had my family because my family is really good at enabling me and not quite shutting the door. My dad did. He did tell me at one point that you don't look like my son, please don't come around. And one of the lessons I got to learn with my father was about, I think it was my 2-year chip, but I was so proud, and I went home and I was like, hey Dad, look, I got 2 years, man, I got this chip. And he just kind of grabbed it and he looked at it and he was like, huh, you're really sober, or you just getting away with it? And kind of threw it back at me, and I was like, it was all sad because I wanted him to tell me I was doing good. But that was a good lesson because I called my sponsor, and my sponsor said, hey man, didn't you set that ball rolling? How many times did you lie to him? How many times have you told him you've done well? I'm like, well, every time, every time I get out of jail, I got all these promises. And so that was a cool thing for me, is I got to learn that because I've changed and done things different, doesn't mean that people get to forgive me on their time and not my time. And that's a good deal. I have, well, let's get back on track, huh? But from the sober softball, we started doing campouts like the Hugs campout, and that was that stuck around for about 3 years. So what I'm trying to get at is I got involved into a lot of service, guys. And if you were like me, and I look back to before I got to these rooms and when I was out there, and I thought everything was going to hold me back, and I thought, if I change, I can't keep doing the things I want to do and having fun and da-da-da-da-da. And so when I got here, I needed those things. I needed the fun campouts, the softball. That's kind of what kept me here, but what gave me some peace is working the steps with my sponsor. And I'm grateful for that today. I'm very grateful. There's a lot of fun things that we've done in sobriety. 2017, we did UCPA. and that was a good deal for us as well. But yeah, I'm about done. Do you want me to keep going though? I got till 8, huh? Okay, so yeah. Let me take a drink. Hi, Brant. But yeah, so UCPA was fun. And if you don't know what that is, that's Young People's in Alcoholics Anonymous. The fun part is I used to like to say that I wasn't young, but they used to trick you and say it's young at heart. And that I am. I'm still a child, still to this day. So, but we did it up at, I always forget what it's called, the Valley Camp. And so if you've never been to campouts or stuff like that, that's something I would suggest to do. It is a fun and amazing thing. But yeah, today the steps are definitely, all right, I'm just talking in circles, so hold on. Okay. Today I have a home group, and it is Thursday night at 7. Recently I had found out I've kind of been resting on others' laurels, I guess, as far as service and AA as a whole. And so I thought that central office and GSR and all that, I've kind of just figured that it's okay, because it's always been okay, and I did some time there, and recently it had been brought up that they could use some help. And so lately in my life, I've kind of been, the alcoholic voice has been a little louder, and so I've gotten more involved with things and started to be of more service and trying to show up to those things. And it's a cool deal to see, because they went to when you had, 3 or 4 people there, and then the following week you have 25 people there. And that's Alcoholics Anonymous. If you put the word out, people are willing to do it. We just got to be those people. So I do love this program very much. It has been a blast. Like, the life I have today is things that I never thought I'd have. I have more blessings than I ever thought I would. It's due to this program. It's not due to me, because I still have horrible thinking. Like, I didn't become not a liar by continually not doing something about it. I had to, at first, and still to this day, if I find myself lying, I just have to correct myself and admit to it, because that's the way I change. And that's the 12 steps in my life. That's not me. But yeah.